We'll turn that mic on as well. Here. I need this mic on, and Jenny the runner is back in action. If you've got a question for David, we've got about 10-15 minutes. Yep, we'll start here. No, you'll keep on. Yep. Can you just raise your hand, by the way, if you have got a question, just so we know? Okay.
Yeah, all right. Hey, thanks David, for a presentation. It was awesome. I'm interested in your experience with cycling and cycle lanes. In New Zealand, I think last 15 years, we went down the track of safety first, cycle helmets, sharing the cycle lanes with streets. I just wonder, I saw in your photos in Copenhagen, they weren't wearing any cycle helmets. And I think it's fascinating because when I talk to people and ask them why don't they cycle, and they say, well, I can't keep my hairstyle if I cycle to work. I mean, I don't have that problem. I hardly got any hair left, but most people, young and old, if they can't have, if they're precious about their hairstyle, they don't choose to cycle, and they're back in their cars on the road. So, just wondering what your thoughts on that is.
Okay, well, it's a very good question. This is a debate everywhere. Bike helmets are not compulsory in Denmark yet. Our office, we have to wear them as kind of a common practice. Mostly anybody who's got kids, you have to wear a helmet anyway because your kids have got a helmet and like, Daddy, why are you not wearing a helmet? So there's a kind of peer pressure thing. I mean, it is a good question. I think the key thing about the Copenhagen system is about safety. And there are constant campaigns. It's partly hardware, like building these bike lanes. And I don't know if you noticed there's a little curb, there's a little height difference, and that just stops cars swinging in. That gives a perception of safety and a physical safety. The other important thing, the Danish system is cycling for dummies. It's a very simple system. You always cycle, there's the pavement, the bike track, you always cycle in the same direction as traffic. And that's really vital because, I mean, inevitably there are always accidents, but if you get hit in the side, you get injured. But if there's a collision, that's when people get killed. So the key thing about the system is about safety. So it's about keeping cars away, the perception of safety, but also the fact you're always going in the same direction as cars. That's vital. I think it's probably a question of time before the helmets in Copenhagen become compulsory. I mean, it's a constant discussion, and I think probably I could have shown photographs with more people wearing helmets. But I mean, certainly it has been suggested that the introduction of compulsory helmets might actually affect our cycling numbers, so we are aware of that.
All right, next question, please.
Thank you, David, for your wonderful ideas for the rebuilding of our city. My question concerns your report of 2009, which in the Christchurch Press a week or so ago, there was a report which surprised me, which said that of the 109 odd recommendations you've made, the council rejected them all except 2. Would you like to comment on that?
No. I actually don't know. I haven't read that article. My impression was certainly from my colleagues here. I don't know whether it's a question of the exact way things have been done. Maybe they've been interpreted in a slightly different way. I think we've certainly felt that our influence has been felt in the city. I think things were beginning to happen. Maybe there were more things in line, but I will certainly consult with my colleagues at the council to find out if that's true. I'm sure it's not.
I'm sorry, we're going to need the microphone before we go any further.
Okay, Hugh at the back can maybe answer this question.
We'll just hold fire. We'll get the microphone to you, just so everyone can hear.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, let's go.
Most of your video presentations showed buildings of no more than 4 or maybe 5 stories. My suggestion has been to the City Council in writing that new buildings in the central city be limited to the same sort of size. I wonder if you want to comment on that, but I'll go on to 2 other points briefly.
Okay, well, about height of building, I mean, I think a big question for you is who wants to go back into high-rise buildings now, having had the experience you've had? I mean, there's lots of experience from Europe which suggests that there are problems with taller buildings. They affect people's both physical and mental health. And it's just common sense. People don't get out as much. If you're above 4 or 5 stories, people don't go out for their coffee breaks. You don't go out at lunchtime. children that live in tall buildings have less friends than people who live near the ground. And it's basically just common sense about getting out. And it's the fresh air, exercise, meeting people thing. As I understand it, tall buildings, I mean especially really tall buildings, are more expensive to build, they're more expensive to maintain, and they use more energy. And obviously there's a huge seismic question. So I think maybe all of those things will answer that question. But I think that's not for me to say. I think it's for the people to say, what kind of city do you want? I mean, I could imagine you could still have a fantastic skyline. I mean, there are lots of cities that have skylines with domes and with turrets and with steeples. I mean, it would be quite nice if the cathedral was maybe the rebuilt tower of the cathedral was the tallest landmark in the city. But I'm only an outsider, so that's for you to say.
Thank you for your response. Moving rapidly on, with this idea of restricted height, maybe the use of solar panels angled to where the sun is shining, of course, might help that micro production of electric power in 1 or 2 or 3 buildings. Another one might be for the gyms. Get all the cycles, the exercycles, connected to a dynamo, produce a wee pocket of energy.
That's excellent. I've never heard that one before, but of course that is a really brilliant suggestion. Harnessing, I mean, these things as well probably could, No, I think there are a whole load of opportunities, and certainly that finer grain, medium, lower rise city allows more exploration of alternative technologies. So I think that sounds like a great idea.
Okay, next speaker.
Oh, look, I was just going to clarify with the Geller report that was that Christchurch received 2 years ago. The council adopted 66 of the recommendations for further investigation. So, look, the council was very pleased, but obviously there was quite a lot of consultation still to happen with people. So yeah, going forward, the council was very positive about that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next question. Raise your hand up there while Jenny's up there. All right. Yes, behind you, Jenny.
Sorry.
Cheers.
Is this ready? Yeah. You talked about limiting the heights of buildings. We're being told a lot about urban sprawl because we're not using the footprint well. There seems to be a tension between limiting the height of the buildings and the amount of horizontal expansion. Could you comment on that, please?
Yes, I would like to comment now. There are many different ways of delivering density, and without becoming too technical, basically tall buildings require much more space around them. It's to do with light, evacuation, lots of reasons. You need to have more space around tall buildings. So very often, skyscrapers, tall buildings take up more space than traditional 3, 4, 5, 6-story traditional city. So there are just different ways of delivering density. So I believe it's perfectly possible to have an even denser city, but without the height. It's just a different way of delivering that density, because you have courtyard spaces, you have gardens, you don't have so much open space around buildings. Another issue I've just thought about, you might want to think about, tall buildings often create turbulence as well. The streets around them. And people say, oh, it's a very windy part of town here. And it's the buildings that create that cold, sort of downrush of wind. So that's another thing to think about with taller buildings.
All right, time for 2 more questions. We'll go with you, sir, and then one over here. Yep, in the suit. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, David. In addition to your concern for creating spaces that are good for people to be in, it seems to me that we have an opportunity to create a model 21st century city which really responds to the fact, for example, that we're coming to the end of our fossil-based energy regime. We're running out of oil. It seems to me we need to build a city in which every building becomes its own power plant, plugged into some kind of grid. We need, I think, from the start to build a city that has an infrastructure for electric cars, because we aren't going to be running gas-powered cars after a while, as well, obviously, as mass transit. So these issues that aren't immediately pressing, but certainly will be in the next very few decades, are things, it seems to me, that need to be addressed now.
I couldn't agree more. And I think if we think about every single building in the city is a kind of a little microsystem in its own right. It can be a reservoir collecting water, it can be its own power plant, it can be a nature reserve with having a green roof or green walls. If we think on every building we give those requirements to, I think that there's a way of achieving that kind of fossil independent future. I don't think, not everybody's ready for it yet, but I think there's a lot of interest. And I think if we can make it possible, if we plant the seeds to make it possible, that would be great. And a lot of the things you're talking about are already being done.
All right. One last question. Yes?
Thank you, David, for a fantastic presentation. I just wanted to ask you, in Christchurch pre-earthquake, we tended to have a lot of people not coming into the city because of our suburban malls. And I'm just wondering what you think about that with the rebuilding and revitalising of the central city now. We desperately need more people wanting to come into the city. So my thought is there's been a lot of talk about the university part or all of it coming back into the city. What's your opinion with that in that regard?
Well, it sounds like a great idea, and I think, first of all, Christchurch has a fantastic tradition of education. Now, I think they've had something that the vice-rector's against the idea, and I can't really comment about it. I think the idea of all kinds of education in the city is really great. I mean, certainly I think also, I know there were some tragedies with the Japanese students, but I think one of the long-term futures for Christchurch could be a place of English language learning, because if you're in South America or in India or wherever you could be, and you're sending your children to learn English, the States and the Britain or United Kingdom are no options now because they're not safe places. And I think just for a place, next 100 years people are going to come and learn English, a great place to send your kids to would be here. A safe place with a wonderful environment, great outdoors. That could be something you could build on. So even if the university doesn't want to move into the city yet, there may be other educational opportunities. And if you bring in the kids, they bring the life with them.
And on that note, thank you very much to David Sim.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say, I'm here with my colleague Simon. Stand up, Simon. We are here all day today. We're here all day tomorrow, and we're really pleased to hear everything you have to say. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you.